Extreme Paintbrawl 4 was developed by Cat Daddy Games and released in 2002 by Activision. Information for this game online is difficult to come by, and there are no reviews for it that I could find. There are a few reviews of the first Extreme Paintbrawl, but not for this one. I found some gameplay footage, but little else. Even the My Abandonware page is pretty sparse. It has a short blurb about the date of release, and that's about it. There are essentially two ways you can play this game. The first, instant action, does exactly what it says on the tin. You get a lot of money to configure your team. I believe it's around $60,000, and you can pick whatever markers you want and select a map and game mode, and it's off to the races. This game is widely panned, mostly due to its association with the first one. Extreme Paintbrawl, the original, is essentially a Doom knockoff that touted itself as being a non-violent shooter. It was coded in 2 weeks and played terribly. I feel that this game has gotten a bad rap because of that, so while the footage plays, I'm going to stop talking for a minute.
I'm out. Ow! I'm hit. Hit. Out. Hit. Ow. Ah. All right. Hit.
So, interesting things to note about the UI as you're looking at it. On the bottom left corner, you can see your teammates and their status and what action they've been set to do, and in elimination matches they're set to combat or assault. So if they're in combat, they'll say it combat, but if they're in assault mode, they'll just proceed towards the nearest enemy player. The top left is your feed, so it'll tell you who got hit by what. The top right is your mini-map. It's very tiny, and the blue dots are your teammates and the red dots are your enemies. They will always be visible, so you know kind of when somebody's going to come around the corner. And on the bottom right, you have your paintballs, grenades remaining, and the pressure of your air tank. If your air tank gets too low, your paintballs will start, dropping off much sooner than they should, just like the real thing. And if it gets low enough, you won't launch any at all. You'll need to change it in the middle of fights, especially if you're doing a lot of sustained fire with an automatic paintball marker. You may have to change that a lot, so it's good to keep an eye on it. The other way to play is the tournament mode, which will start you off with a measly sum. For medium it's $1,500, and no players. You'll have to recruit at least one to start off, give them a marker, some paint, and a CO2 canister at the very bare minimum. They actually start with a slug, so if you want to try the slug out, you can start with that, but you will need to buy them paint and a CO2 canister. The enemy teams will always come with full crew, so you'll always be against 5. So you may want to grab a second guy and give him some stuff to start with. You can see the stats of the players you're recruiting, and they're fairly straightforward. Speed is your movement speed, accuracy is how close to the crosshair you can get consistently, and the average of how many flyers you get. Flyers are left, right, and up. You'll see if you shoot a burst, a couple of them will fly off to the left and right. And evasion is how quickly and how often you can dodge. I don't use the dodge much, but some people might like dodging. Accuracy is most useful for me, but your mileage may vary. You'll start in the qualifiers with enemies holding slugs and thermonizers, which are the first 2 paintball guns you can get. And neither you nor they will be very accurate, so you would expect close range and fairly intense fights with quite a bit of moving around. Before you start the game, you're going to want to remap your keybinds because WASD movement and R to reload had not been standardized yet. I don't remember what the default binds are, but I remember them being very weird. Additionally, you will have to manually turn your crosshair on every game, but I find that it can be quite helpful. Turning it on once just turns it on, and turning it on twice makes it move around with your paintball marker. I don't use that version, I just use the crosshair on the middle of the screen. There are a few different game modes. You get center flag, capture the flag, elimination, and gauntlet. Center flag sees both teams fighting for a single flag in the middle. 3 captures and you win. Capture the flag is what it says on the tin. There's a flag on your end and a flag on their end. 3 caps, you win. Elimination is just team deathmatch. Tons of fun. First team to 20 wins. Gauntlet is where it mixes things up a little. In Gauntlet mode, you get one chance versus the entire enemy team, but they won't be gunning for you all at the same time. There are a variable number of flags that are dependent on the map, and they'll be guarding them. However, they're inactive until either they see you or you miss them. Paintballs flying by will activate them, so it becomes kind of a sniping or stealthing challenge. If you capture all the flags or take out the whole team, you win. But one hit, and you'll be sent back to the menu to give it another shot. With all that out of the way, let me just say, this game imitates the feeling of paintball very well. Most professional games, or professional tournaments that would have regionals and nationals tend to be more like speedball, whereas this plays more like woodsball, or, the traditional weekend paintball game. Greg Hastings' paintball tournament, and a different game that actually does simulate a professional speedball team, just didn't feel as fun to me growing up. I appreciate that the players here always call their hits and don't get up to dirty tricks. I play airsoft from time to time in Japan, and I appreciate that people call their hits. Greg Hastings had a mechanic where you could wipe the paint off, which I didn't care for very much. There's even a tactics menu where you can coordinate your team to cover your weak points, patrol areas, defend objectives, and assault positions. I didn't get it working in the footage, but it is there, and it's decently handy at times. Another nice thing is the enemy team will grow the same way you do. As you start getting into the higher levels of the tournament, the regionals and nationals, they'll start bringing better gear and leveling up, so the gameplay feels dynamic, and especially when one guy randomly brings the can-away grenade launcher. Don't get near a corner when you see that guy coming. The locations are another upside. There's the typical spots like an indoor paintball arena and the winter forest, places that you'd actually play paintball. But then there are some more creative choices too, like a movie theater with 3 floors and movies running, or a decently 2002-ish recreation of an office space. There's even a prison and a military base. So it feels like to me one of the guys on the dev team probably had the same thought I have sometimes of, it'd be pretty neat to play paintball or airsoft in a space like this. Alright, and with the good, we get the bad. Now, I've been saying mostly positive stuff, but there are some things that cause a notable break in the fun. For one is the AI. It's appropriate for the time. The enemy team and your team, if they're not directed, tend to use the same paths most of the time, which keeps the fights in the same couple of areas. You can fix this by directing your guys to form up in ways that funnel fights elsewhere, but that's not a perfect solution, and it doesn't always work. I find a little bit of fun in using the less traveled paths for flanks that tend to push the fight into other areas anyways, so win-win. Especially if you're carrying the flag, they will chase you. Additionally, the graphics, the resolution and textures are, old. That's okay. The lighting's pretty nice, especially in the prison map where the cafeteria is. You see the sunbeam shining through the side of the windows. Pretty neat. My least favorite bit so far is probably the music. There are only 3 or 4 tracks in this game, all instrumental punk rock kind of loops, about a minute and a half long at most. The victory and defeat sounds are 3 harmonics being plucked, and a short guitar riff, respectively. If you're coming along for the ride, you might want to bring your own tunes, because the one that come with the game get pretty repetitive pretty quick, although I don't really notice in the middle of the fights, mostly it's the menus. In summary, I wanted to see someone's thoughts on this game, and turned out that I was the person whose thoughts had to be put out, because there aren't really any reviews of it. If you want an old game to burn an afternoon with, or to set up local LAN games with your friends, I'd absolutely recommend trying this one out, although it's certainly very niche, and absolutely a product of its time. If you were to ask me to rate it out of 10, I'd probably give it a 6.5,